Perfect. Well, thank you. So today we are going to be going over a few different utilities within our Evolve. So one, we are going to be going over Element Filter, which I would definitely recommend getting real comfortable with Element Filter. You're going to see that the Element Filter is going to be one throughout our utility and two throughout our software itself. Other tools that we are going to go through are Colorizer, your Workset Manager, and also our Compare Data. I'm going to move my panel over a little bit just so it will expand out so we can see all the features. So first we are going to be talking about Element Filter. So Element Filter is right here. You can find Element Filter within your Utilities panel within Evolve. And we're going to find it right here, Element Filter. If I select it, depends on how you have everything set up. I like docking mine all right here so I can have my little tabs. But you can have your feature itself be shown wherever makes sense to you and your brain and setup. So with your element filter, there is a few things to be aware of. And this is going to be pretty core throughout Evolve, is with our quote unquote like grids, you're going to see a few different things. So you can see, I call these my actionary icons. They typically allow you to do something. So we have your reset view, which I'll give you a fair warning on in a little bit here. We have your modify filter, and you have your export filter and your import filter. These are going to be user-based, so keep that in mind. So if you see any of your coworkers having really cool element filters and you want them, just tell them to come in here and select any of the rules that you like, and then have them export them out, and then you can import them in. So just be aware of that. Again, these are going to be user settings, but you can come into your settings here. So my little gear, and you can see we do have the element filter settings where you can have your network location. So if you're wanting pretty much everyone to have a good starting point or similar filters, you can identify them here. All right, yours might look a little bit different than mine. I typically like having just my group and my name. So the group itself and the name of the filter. If I ungroup that, you can see we have all of my filters here. Again, this is going to be very core for Evolve in general, but if I were to right click on my column here, we are going to see we have our column chooser. Within our column chooser, you are going to see some hidden columns here. I could bring it in. So yours might look more like this, but I'm somebody who likes kind of just more that simple organization. We do have hotkeys, so theoretically you could keyboard shortcut your element filter and then also hotkey individual filters as well. I'm going to come in here and hide these. I can hide them by dragging them back, or I can highlight them and hit my hide this column. Whichever one works better for you. And then I'm going to group it again. All right, so we have your group, and then we have the name itself. Other things to be aware of are some of your icons down here. Again, these are going to be pretty core throughout Evolve when it comes to the features themselves. So you can see I have 1 out of 43. So you can see that is indicating that we have 43 rules or 43 filters created. I can add a new one by hitting my add new. I could delete one by selecting it and hitting my delete selected. It'll prompt you saying, are you sure? Yep. And then it'll delete it. I can duplicate. So if you have a rule or a filter that is pretty much exactly what you need, but you want to make minor tweaks and create a new filter, I would definitely recommend duplicating it, making those minor adjustments, and going from there. We can also export this to Excel. And when it comes to filters, I don't think you'll necessarily want to do that, but this right here is handy in some of the other features. So going on from there, let's create some rules and some filters. So with our element filter, there's a lot of different use cases for it. So think about how you want to control information in your project. If you are somebody who happens to select an element and utilize your control on your keyboard and selecting multiple elements at once, then you're going to love element filter. If you're somebody who's searching for information when it comes to elements not having the information that you need, again, you can create different filters to make sure that you're selecting elements that are missing information. Or again, you're able to easily just control the view as well. So I wanted to quickly turn off walls or floors or quickly select tags or delete tags. I also have that option as well instead of hitting my VV or getting my visibility graphics. All right, let's create a new rule. So I'm going to come down here and say add new. And then my element filter will pop up here and we can start to define our filter. Coming up here, I can copy from existing. So again, this is going to work very similar to duplicating one of your filters. I'm able to pull from existing information. So if it's about, again, 90% there, but you want to make a minor adjustment to it and create a new rule, keep that other rule, definitely recommend just copying from existing. This right here, the copy from existing, you're going to see that throughout your features as well. So anytime you see element filter, you typically can hit your copy from existing up here. And we'll show you some examples later on here. Next, we have your export filter and import in as well. So next, let's specify our filter name. So I am going to do lighting. My group, again, this is how I typically group my rules together. In this one, I'm going to say monthly meeting. I can do a subgroup so I can get even more crazy specific on my organization of my rules. I'm going to leave it blank, but it's totally up to you. Next, we can specify your categories. So specify the elements themselves. You technically can have multiple categories. If that's the case, I would suggest thinking about the parameters that you're going to be wanting to almost specify. So think about a common parameter with the multiple categories that you are selecting. In this scenario, I'm going to keep it very, very basic and just do my lighting fixtures, and that's that. For my rules, I could create a ton of these, or I can get very specific on my selection itself. So I'm going to do add a condition, specify my parameter itself. So typically with creating a new filter, I'm somebody who likes looking at the family that I'm trying to identify. So actually I'm going to hit cancel. And let's actually look at one of these families and figure out what we want to do. So if I select this light here, you're going to see a few things. One, be aware of the category. If you know it, perfect. But when it comes to different elements, or if you're just starting out, look up here to identify the category itself. And then you can come in here and specify what do you want to have your element filter be looking for. I could do it as simple as the family, the type. If I am having certain parameter information into like a comments field, so when this light is bad, I can identify that. So think about the parameters itself. If you use like a screenshot or a Snagit tool or any type of tool to help screenshot parts of your view, Definitely recommend it, especially when you're getting used to creating new rules. It comes in really handy to be able to look at that rule and then be able to look at the parameters within the family itself. All right, let's go back to my element filter and redo that one. So we're going to go into our add new, specify my filter name, lighting, my group. I'm going to do, again, monthly meeting category. I'm going to type in light. Again, I could just search for it by looking for everything, but there's a good amount of categories in here, so I always say type it in and it's going to be a lot easier in that realm. I can hit my hide unchecked categories. This will uncheck everything other than your selection itself. Next, once you've identified the categories, now we can create some of those rules. So I'm going to hit my add condition and I'm going to specify the parameter. So with this, I'm going to do type actually for this scenario. So again, specify the parameter, your operator here. So you can see this is where you can come in handy with some of like more of the QC rules and identifying what you're looking for. I could do is blank or is not blank for a parameter. So if you are wanting to look for like non-standard bends, or if a parameter itself is not right because you're exceeding certain dimension, or let's say your lights have bad within the comment parameter, you can either search for information and identify the parameter, or you can actually just say that a parameter is blank as well. In this situation, I typically like saying contains if I'm actually specifying the value itself. It makes life a lot easier. You don't have to be completely exact. If I said is equal to, it has to be the complete is equal to. Your input type, consistent value. So in this situation, you're specifying the value itself. Prompt for value. So if I didn't want to create a whole bunch of different types of lights, when it comes to just being able to select the elements, I could, instead of doing consistent value and identifying every light type, I could have it prompt for value. It'll prompt me, and you can type in the type itself, and we can show you that as well. I'm going to do consistent value and then specify my value itself. I'm going to do A4. I could add some and statements or statements. So like I said, you can get crazy specific on what you are trying to find or select. We have some options here. So with our default filter action, so I could technically limit myself to what I'm trying to select in the way of the action itself. So maybe I only want to select all of my A4s. I can identify that. I typically like having this unchecked just so I have control of it. But, maybe if the information has parameter information, maybe you want it to just be halftone at that point. So then again, you can identify that. Like I said, I like having this unchecked. Your tolerance, so you can do a tolerance on decimal values. Case sensitive conditions. I typically do not like having it be case sensitive, but it is totally up to you on what you want to do there. And then we can also get crazy specific and almost push the boundaries of Evolve and Revit and create some PowerShell scripts as well. So this is creating a filter itself. We're going to hit OK. Now when I go back into my element filter, find my group, we're going to see that rule itself. So if I select this filter and say select, it's going to select all of my A4s here. So be aware that this is going to be view specific. So If I wanted to select all my A4s in my entire project, you could go to a 3D view that shows every floor of your project itself, and then you're able to select all A4s. Let's create one more, and I'm going to do this a little bit fast. So we'll do lighting, we'll do A2, monthly meeting. The group itself, be careful of any spaces or making any slight changes to the group. If I have a space, it's going to think it's needing a new group. So be aware of that. Categories, lighting fixtures, add a condition, specify the parameter, type, contains, consistent value, A2. Oops, A2. Oh my word. A2. There we go. All right, we're gonna hit OK. There we go. Now with this first one I created, I kind of want to identify what I'm looking for. So I'm gonna click modify this and add a A4 here. Press OK. There we go. So now I can hit my A2, I can select them, and there we go. With this, so like I said, it is going to be view specific, and also it's going to be like selection specific as well. So if I pre-select it, so let's select kind of just this chunk here, and then I run my A4, select this filter, it's going to be only based on my first selection. So I technically could go to one room, select just that one room, and then run a filter. So then it will be looking at just that room itself, or whatever you select. All right, once you've identified your element filter, then you could create some colorizer rules as well. Or again, depending on how you are going to be utilizing this, there's a lot of different use cases for it. I like thinking about it as a way of QC and just being able to control your information a little bit more. Native Revit has some filtering options. I can come in here, filter it down, but you're very limited on what you're actually looking for. So element filter, you have a lot of control. So definitely recommend playing around with it. Think about how you want to utilize it. Maybe selecting conduit size, or selecting equipment, or selecting specific hangers, helmets that have a certain size. Honestly, you can create a filter for anything. So keep in mind, it really is going to be based on anything within this category itself. So look through your categories. If you see it, you can create a filter for it and identify the rule and get really specific that way. So like I said, element filter, this is the one tool I recommend getting comfortable with. Create those filters, get a feel of it, because once we get into some of the other utilities, we do utilize our element filter a lot. All right, perfect. So let's move on to now Colorizer. So once you've identified your filter, so created all these different filters to specify elements, to find things, especially when we get into like the QC side of things. So cool, I've identified these different lights. I can easily select them and have control of them. But what if I wanted to alert me when information is missing, or I want to create different colors to be associated with these elements? That's where Colorizer will come in handy. So Colorizer is going to be within your Utilities panel, and we're going to find it right here, Colorizer. So there's a lot of use cases for Colorizer and a lot of different ways that we could identify what Colorizer is. I could say that Colorizer is almost like a universal filter itself. So instead of having to go to every single view and associate filters with them or a view template, you can specify the colors of your elements right within here. So you're going to see, again, I have my group, and just like my element filter, I'm going to see some of our icons down here and some of our action area icons up here as well. So let's create some new rules. So my run order, think about this as very similar to filtering. So the order at which this will run when you have multiple selected and you're refreshing your view itself. So which one is kind of like top priority, or which one's gonna take the last one there. All right. I also do like having my run in second passing and also allow multiple processing checked. I like having those checked. And then also make sure that those are enabled. So we'll have our check marks right here, and then we'll move on to some of our other column information. So rule name. So this is going to be identifying what this actually is. So I'm going to say lighting A, oop, A4. Oop, A4. There we go. So specify your rule name. Description. So these are going to be project settings. So anytime you see this word project right here, that is indicating anything that you establish here is going to be impacting the Revit file itself. So you could definitely have one person create all of these rules, and then everybody else will have access to it. So if that's the case, sometimes it is handy to have a description associated with it so everyone knows what's going on. I'm also going to come in here and do best fit all columns, just so we can kind of see what's going on here. All right, so description. So you can type it in if you'd like. If not, that's cool too. Element filter. So you can see we have that glorious element filter. So I could come in here and define it. So come in here and specify the category, my rules, or I could come up here and pull from the rule I just created, which is what we'll do. So I'm going to come up here and say copy from existing. I'm going to say yes. I don't have anything there anyways. And then you have all of your different element filters defined. What is handy about this is it is an evolved grid, so I can filter down my selection to find what I'm trying to look for. Especially if you have a ton of filters already created, it might be handy to, again, have it be sorted there. So I could technically come in here and sort it that way, or I can come in here and filter it down as well. So with this one, I can identify what I'm looking for here. So we'll pull all the information in for me, and I'm gonna hit OK. So we've identified the elements that we want to be a certain color, and then we can also specify the views that this is impacting. So if I go in here, so we'll bring up your element filter, but now we're identifying the views. So I can only specify the category of views here. So if I have my views checked, it's going to be identifying all of my views in my entire project. So again, this is where it can come into that this is creating almost like a universal filter. Or I could get view specific. So I technically could come in here and say view name contains lighting. You can see it right here. That is going to be my view that I'm currently in. So maybe I don't want my entire project to have my lights be a certain color. You can identify it per view as well. I'll delete this. Again, maybe it's something where, level 1 you want to be a certain color, level 2 and so on. Or if you want to identify like in a 3D view elements to be a certain color, again, that's where you can have control of it being view specific. But I'm just going to do it universal and have all of my lights be one color. Well, all of my A4s be a certain color. Press OK. So now we've identified the element, we've identified the views, and now we can identify the color. So with that, let's do a blue. With the color itself, you could get pretty crazy with the customization. I can hit my more colors actually here, and I can really specify what I'm looking for here. We can do a pretty baby blue. So identify the color and then specify the pattern itself. So you're going to want to specify that pattern. I'm going to do a solid fill, but again, you can identify what you're looking for there. I'm not going to worry about the background. I'll show you what Clear Colorizer does. So instead of applying the color, it'll clear the color. Which again, we'll show that. Execute on. This is probably the two things I would look for is if you're having any issues with anything, the execute on and if it is enabled. Those are the two I'd look for. Again, if it's not enabled, it's not going to work. So you're going to want to make sure it's enabled. And then similar with the execute on, if it is set as manual only, you'd have to come back into your colorizer and refresh it to get those colors associated with those elements. So my favorite one is on any update, but it also really depends on what you are trying to utilize this for. Sometimes new element creation or existing element change might be handy if you're wanting to almost like indicate changes after, your floor is completely signed off, things like that. So I'm going to do on any update. I hit apply because I have a pending action there. That's also a tip or trick I definitely recommend is looking at your pending action and your error message. Like when I come in here and start to create something, you can see with my error message, name must be provided. All right, identified my name. All right, your view filter must be provided. So if you're seeing an error, typically the message will indicate why you're having that error. So definitely look at these right here. I'm going to delete this one. All right, so we've identified everything for my A4. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to refresh it. I'm going to refresh it because I just created this and I want to make sure my view itself has those colors. Refresh it. There we go. So now we can see we have colors. Woo! So again, the colorizer is really something that you can identify the colors themselves. I love colorizer for multiple reasons. You could definitely create anything that you have within your filters currently and specify colorizer for it because it's just one situation that you have to identify. Also with colorizer, since they are project settings, I also recommend this export import in, especially if you are going to be utilizing, standard colorizer rules, but maybe certain projects need certain things. I definitely recommend for any of those odd situations or different scenarios, export them out to a file because you never know, you might need that at a different project. All right, so now we have some colors. So here's my fair warning with the reset view, now that I have colors associated with these elements. If I just used my standard, native Revit EH to hide an element, so EH, keyboard shortcut. So I hit it, elements, I have colors, everything looks great. If I hit this reset view, it is going to reset your view completely. So if I hit it, reset it, it's going to clear the colors and it's going to bring back those hidden elements. So there is a lot of use cases for it, but I want to give you a fair warning. Depending on the view that you're in, you might not want that to be cleared, so be aware of that. If you ever accidentally do it, go up to your handy undo. I'm going to undo this a few times because I want to bring those lights back. All right, so the next thing that we're going to go over is your work set manager. So There's a lot of use cases for your Workset Manager itself. You're going to find your Workset Manager within Utilities and Workset Manager. So with your Workset Manager, instead of having to come down here and switch to the right workset before you model in your content, your Workset Manager allows you to create rules and associate those rules with your workset itself. So then you don't have to worry about it. It's kind of a set it and forget it at that point. So let's go into our Workset Manager now. All right, you're going to see that these utilities are looking very similar, and we try to give you that same feel so you're really comfortable with what it's looking for and what you need here. So with this, we're going to do a run order. Do one. My rule name, I'm going to do lighting. Hit my check marks here, and again, do my run in second passing. Allow multiple processing. Again, these are handy throughout the utilities. Just gives you that peace of mind when you're making modifications, it's going to still apply. Description. Your Workset Manager is, again, glorious, another project settings. So, especially with Workset Manager, you might want to let your coworkers know why you're creating these or what it's actually doing. So I could say my rule name is lighting, but my description, I could say this is impacting, all of my A4, A2, and so on, or all types of lighting. You can specify that. Element filter now. So again, get into it here. So I could come in here and pull from existing, but I did get a little too specific on what I'm looking for the lighting. So I'm going to make this very generic and just say lighting fixtures. And that's that. So I'm wanting all of my lighting fixtures to be then now assigned to a specific work set. So we're identifying the elements themselves here. But this is where it really comes in handy for like conduit, let's say. So maybe if you're going into extreme detail for your work sets and you're doing it by size or by conduit type, you can specify that then. So you could do at that point conduit, add a condition, and specify the size or again the type itself. But this one, I'm going to keep it pretty generic. Just keep those lighting. Let's make sure I didn't accidentally select anything. So I'm going to hit my hide unchecked. Yep. So I'm going to uncheck that the conduits themselves. So I'm going to have just my lighting fixtures. Yep. And I'm going to delete this rule. All right. So just my lighting fixtures. Press OK. So we've identified the elements. Now I can specify the work set. So I have again a blanketed term of just lighting. So perfect. Here's another one of the execute on. This is another great example of I like having on any update. But it's totally up to you. If you're wanting to almost double check to make sure that you're really on top of it for your work sets, you could definitely have this menu only. At the end of the day, you could come in here and refresh it and see if any of the elements were on the wrong work set. But I would prefer just on any update and then you can just not have to worry about it. Last but not least here, we're going to do enable it. So we want to make sure that this is enabled. All right, so name, what is impacting, what do you want to be associated with, make sure it's on any update, and make sure it's enabled. I could also, again, organize this a lot more too, depending on how many of your work sets you have and how much is going on, you might want to, again, have some organization as well. All right, so we have identified this. I'm going to press apply. I'm going to select it and I'm going to refresh my current view. It says that one is enabled. Yep, I want to run through it. All right, press OK. Now when I select one of my lights, I'm going to go into my properties here, and I'm going to scroll down. Now you can see my work set is set to lighting, and that is going to be for any of my lights. What's really nice about this is if I were to try to change this to the wrong work set, it's going to put it right back. If you wanted to change that work set, maybe you accidentally assigned it to the wrong work set, no big deal. We can go back into your work set manager and associate a different work set here. You could uncheck your enable so then it won't be enabled, but the only issue is with that is if you enable it and then make modifications to it and you're thinking that's good, these are project settings, so be aware of that. If one person comes in here, enables everything, and refreshes it, then it will be put back to whatever workset is identified here. All right, so now we have one. We can find all of my A4s, I can color all my A4s, and I can have the peace of mind that all of my lighting is on the right work set. So the last feature that we're going to talk about today is your compare data. So your compare data, there's a lot of different use cases for it. Compare data is a relatively new feature within your Evolve Electrical. What you're able to do is compare data. So I'm able to select, multiple of my elements, 1, 2, however I want to do it. You're going to see a few things here. So I'm going to see all of my parameters that are associated with that element. You might see some more information than you would typically see within just your properties here. You're able to have a little bit more of a looking into the parameters themselves or more information about the element itself. So just be aware of that when you're looking at this information. If it seems like, wow, there's a lot of stuff, a lot more than what I see in my properties, just be aware of that. We are unlocking more information for you with that compare data. So let's say if something's having an issue or you're worried that you are missing information, this is a great tool to almost QC for yourself or have a little bit more again looking into that element itself. So it's also a great feature to help when in addition to some of the other tools within your utilities. So with this, you can see I can be within the view itself. I can come in here and play around with my compare data. I can look at my properties. I can kind of go back and forth. I can check both of the lights that I selected to view that information, or I can uncheck one. You can see it's deselected, and I'm going to be able to view that information of just that one element. Both are selected in my view. You're going to see you have your name, ID, and the family. That is going to be listed here. Just like your Evolve grids, I can filter down information just to be able to view certain things. The other thing that is really handy here is some of our options here. So within here, we have your show only differences. So if this one's checked, it's going to show me the differences. So again, it's really handy where if you're like, oh my gosh, I think all of these lights should be completely exact. There should be nothing different about them. I'm going to select them all here. I can then compare my differences. So in this situation, you can see there's mark information that's different. My comments are different. And also I have some other emergency symbol information that is going to be different as well. We have this option of show your values here. So with this, it's going to show you what you are seeing here. So again, this is another great use case for if you think it should all be correct and it should all be the same, you should only see one value here. If you see multiple values here, it is because they are not all the same values within here. So typically, if you have the show differences, this is going to have multiple values here. If I uncheck this here, you're going to see a lot of these now have one value associated with it. So this is just a way of being able to have a deeper understanding of the elements that you're selecting and have a little bit more of a looking glass into what's going on with your families as well. You do have an element limit, so I can't select my entire project and run this. I mean, you technically could, you can bump up your limit, but the issue with that is it could slow down if you have a ton, if you're selecting a couple hundred here. Right now, I'm just barely exceeding. I have 25 selected, but I am exceeding, so it is saying that my limit has been exceeded. So you can see I can bring in 17 here and view all that information. So I'm even selecting my reference plane and all my lights here. You can see a lot of them have different conflicting values here, depending on, because I've selected multiple types. So again, this is a great tool just to be able to view information as well. So definitely recommend playing around with your utility tools, have control of it, play around with it, and get comfortable with them. There's a lot of use cases for it and a lot of ways that you can really improve your speed and just the quality of your project as well. All right. Well, that's everything. Again, I know we didn't leave too much time for questions, so feel free to email us directly. My email is amber.zinke@evolvemep.com. If there's any questions that I did not get to, please email me directly and we can always dive a little bit more into some of the use cases as well. All right, thank you.